Hello my friends, let's start this video from the front lines review. This is the Pokrovsk town and you see that the battle is happening inside the settlement. The Russians are using seepage infiltration tactics with the small groups advancing towards the city, but still it is a gray area. The presence of the main Russian forces was spotted a little to the south, where they recently expanded the territorial gains advancing towards the Shahtyrsky district of Pokrovsk. This is the industrial area of the town, so Russians could use some of the basements to hide their infantry forces, so from now on it's gonna be very hard to kick them out from the place, and Ukraine is trying to kick Russians out. As you might see, here is the Ukrainian counterattack vector. There is now an attempt by Ukrainian side to cut Russians in Litovice, so in a way there is the probability, however it's not high, but still it is out there, for Russian forces to be trapped in this southern outskirt of Pokrovsk. That's probably the plan of this Ukrainian counterattack operation, but at the same time Russia tries to expand this bridgehead, not letting Ukraine to cut their forces in a straightforward single attack. Well, I would say that in general the entire Pokrovsk town is now in a gray zone and Ukrainian infantry is placed there just occasionally, because all of this area is targeted by enemy drones, but Ukraine is also using its drones in Pokrovsk and close by territories which are controlled by Russia, but still Russian army could be hit out there. As you might see, Ukraine is using drones in Zvirova and even aviation strikes in the south. In the modern day war, it's really hard to advance with significant forces. Usually those are the small attack forces or small defense forces which are placed in particular town blocks. So enemy is using also this tactics with the small forces, and as for them I would say it's the most profitable nowadays. Is the situation now catastrophic for Ukrainian army? I wouldn't say so, no. Even for Pokrovsk, Russia is unable to take this entire town just right now with those small amount of the forces. However, they might disturb Ukrainian logistics and Ukrainian defense in the settlement, and later on they might try to advance here with their main forces or even armored vehicles. As for the armored vehicles, guys, it is crazy what is happening on the front lines. If you follow me, you already know that Russians try to attack in many of the directions with their mid-wave iron convoys, and we're gonna speak about that as well, because Russia seems like doesn't want to stop, which will lead again from more of the losses, especially for their side. But speaking about Pokrovsk, Russians already before were spotted even in the central part of this town. It's not the first time happening like this advancement. It's nothing new, guys. What is new, however, that Russia advanced with their regular army main forces closer to the settlement, and they might take positions, as I say to you, in industrial area. And even aviation strikes in this case, they probably won't help. So despite this interesting map, you see, I would say this is the only difference, and here is Ukrainian counterattack. That's something new, and Russia is trying to use this time of the year to advance with their infantry forces until it is too late for the weather conditions. Not every weather now is good for the Russian attacks, and they cannot use their drones during the morning time because usually there are fogs, but it also applies for Ukrainian side. Also, Russians have to stick to the roads with their motorized attacks, especially then they use light vehicles with wheels. As for BMPs and tanks, well, they still sometimes may go across the fields, as we witnessed in Pokrovsk-Dnipropetrovsk direction before, but even in that case their attacks were stopped by Ukrainian drone operators and artillerymen. And now let's go to the interactive map, guys. This is the map presented by the Myco73 Analytic. The link for his Twitter you may find in the video description below, and there is his link tree where he analyzes all of the hot military conflicts out there in the planet, including Ukraine. And I would say his maps are pretty much precise because he analyzes every spot on the front lines and every information coming from the drone cameras. For example, this was the geolocation of the Ukrainian counterattack. So our forces were spotted in attempt to cut Russian supplies towards Pokrovsk. And the fights are ongoing even inside the city itself, close to the central part. Again, geolocation with Ukrainian army presence, and there was the fight for some local building. Small forces, still not yet the main Russian military group. Well, despite those Russian actions, as you might see, Ukraine is more active in this area, using infantry, drones, aviation. absolutely everything. But Russian presence was spotted indeed, and Russia is using aviation strikes too. As you might see here, they hit some of the industrial plant. Well, as for the winter time, I don't think that Russian infiltration tactics could really work. Well, anyways, we'll see. And again, let's look at this part, oh my god, where Russia started to use the old tactics, advancing with convoys. Well, for the last 24 hours, there were just occasional fights, and Russia didn't send lots of the forces, but still, they maintained the same tactics. Which I think after all is quite stupid, because here their main attempt was to go to Shakhove, to expand the bridgehead and to re-encircle their army group in Kucherev Yar and the one that was trapped between Novoshachove and Shakhove. But every time they sent not enough forces to take the positions, or they sent those in the wrong way, where for example this bridge, where is this river? Yeah, this bridge is being destroyed. An absolute poor planning. In the comments you say sometimes, yeah, some people say that Dennis do not tell mistakes for Russian army, they learn from their own mistakes, not from me. And Russian military bloggers, they tell exactly the same stuff what I tell you here, that this is the stupid way to attack for Russia. So Russian command may get the same information that I tell you from their own Russian informational field. Russian military bloggers, they do not believe in what is happening with those crazy losses. They're asking the question why and how it was done that poorly. So it's not me only saying about that stuff. They all understand it. I think Russian commanders, they understand that stuff themselves, and they obtain the orders, okay, go and take, for example, Shakhove with what you have. Okay, today we have 6 of the vehicles, so let's throw them there. The day after tomorrow they receive, for example, 9 vehicles prepared for attack with some of the electronic warfare which doesn't work and hunger type of the vehicles, and they decided to throw it to the same Shakhove direction, maybe using different road at the very end, but all of that failed from the very beginning on the Russian so-called controlled territory where Ukrainian drones continue to operate. So the main incompetence of the Russian army comes not only from the local commanders who do not understand sometimes the situation, but also it comes from the very top. Gerasimov, for example, he wants to present some of the achievements to Putin, but he doesn't understand what is happening in particular direction. In Russian army, this feedback is very poor. Just imagine if Russians concentrated all of those forces which they used for multiple of the attacks in so many directions, if they gathered those in a single convoy, like 50 of the vehicles they lost for the last couple of weeks. So imagine convoy of 50 vehicles, and Ukraine needs sometimes even 10 drones to stop one tank because it's hunger, so you need to break through it, bomb it, then some of the lucky drone penetrates it, causing some sort of the kaboom. So it's kind of hard also for Ukrainian drone operators to stop those convoys, and they do it because they have enough drones to do it, enough forces, enough drone operators. So 9 vehicles is okay, but if Russia sends, for example, 25 vehicles, I think that some of them could reach even Ukrainian positions. Yeah, the most of the Russian convoys still would be destroyed, but Russians might land their forces in some of the village of Shakhove, maybe Toretsky, and create some sort of the bridgehead where they can feed it with more forces, and Ukrainian drone operators would be forced to also deflect on infantry positions in those villages. So use less drones for the next Russian convoys. That's the only Russian tactics which they potentially could use to gain the ground in more or less fast manner, because with the small infiltration groups it takes them lots and lots of the time to gain new territories. And there is the information coming that Russia is probably preparing for the massive convoy attack also in the same direction. It seems like after those crazy 2 weeks with their losses, they understood that something is not okay, that they need really more vehicles to get the ground. But even if they use that kind of the tactics, it would bring them tremendous losses. They will not be able to continue it for every village. Just here, maybe to advance to Kucherev Yar, Shakhove, Toretsky, maybe with that one they can do it. But what is next? You see in many villages, even settlements, even cities of Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, Drushkivka, all of that is a big, long settlement. And well, Russia is very close to Konstantinovka. We're going to discuss it today. But in general, if Russia is losing that amount of the vehicles for nothing really, they put Vladimirivka into the gray zone, and later on there was a Ukrainian counterattack. Oh my! So no territorial gains for those entire losses. Just maybe one of the vehicles was capable to land the forces in power station here, not far away from Mirnograd. That's the only success for the Russian army in this place for the couple of weeks. Crazy. But using the same forces in different manner, like for example single strike, one direction as I mentioned, yeah, they could have been successful going to Shakhova, Toretsk, and maybe even Kucherev Yar, because the amount of the forces is huge. But they just split the forces, attacking one day, then in another day, letting Ukrainian army to be prepared for every sort of the Russian group and using available resources, drone resources first of all. And now let's go to Konstantinivka, where Russians advanced further and they cut this supply road to Konstantinivka. Russians were spotted in this local, it's the cemetery. Yeah, there was the infantry of the Russian army. They are no go any longer, but I cannot show you this video on the channel. So we see how this gray area expanded from Alexander Shultin and from Toretsk. It means that Russia is still not controlling all of this territory. They're moving with small sabotage forces, and Ukraine is using drones to kaput them. And that's how we actually know about the presence of the Russian army, because of the videos published by Ukrainian defenders from those drones. So here this road, it was crossed by the Russian sabotage groups, but it doesn't mean that they're controlling it. However, they used drones to hit, I would say, this pretty much entire area. Russian drones even were spotted in Kramatorsk, which is not close to the front lines. Here we have some photos of the Ukrainian cameraman in Konstantinivka direction. So the situation there, well, it's battlefield. Yeah, it's the war zone out there already. Lots of the razor wire and drone protection you might see for Ukrainian supplies. And Konstantinivka been shelled day and night. Again, aviation gliding bomb is there. Some of the vehicles, and Ukraine, as you see, also has some of the losses, especially unarmored vehicles like pickup trucks that only have some of the anti-drone meshes. Well, this vehicle didn't burn down, so probably crew survived. Well, from entire front lines, despite Russia concentrated the most of the efforts in Pokrovsk, Dobropila and Konstantinivka, still the only direction where they move with their regular main Russian forces in this one, Dnipropetrovsk, Zaporizhia. So every day they take the ground. If you go 2 days ago, you might see that definitely they're taking the ground. Ukrainian defense is not strong, not as strong as in Donetsk direction. That's why Putin asks Donald Trump to push Ukraine for capitulation. Capitulation means giving up Donetsk Oblast just like that without any fight, because Putin simply is unable to take it by force. But here definitely Russians move. The main Ukrainian defense line goes a little behind. You know, Pokrovsk, it's the main settlement on the way to Zaporizhia, and you see the line of those small villages. Here is the main, somewhere here is the main Ukrainian defense line. Plus there are some big rivers here which create some sort of the natural obstacles for Russia, so soon they will be stopped. I'm sure about it. And of course, for the winter time, it's hard for Russia to propel forward. But Ukraine is also successful. Here's the update from the Sumy direction. The heavy fights are now ongoing for Alexeyevka. Ukraine has several of the counterattack vectors, and Ukraine takes the ground, forcing Russians to retreat from this village. And yeah, finally Russians will be forced to leave it, because Russia took the forces out from this direction. They don't have enough of the resources to continue to resist against Ukrainian countermeasures. Yeah, we have new videos published from the front lines. Today there was also Russian vehicle attack. Not many vehicles, just 3. All of them were stopped. What Russia is doing now, it's melting down its own forces. No territorial gains, nothing. They go and they lose. That's it. That's nonsense. It's insanity, but it is happening. I'm sure that if it was happening in Ukrainian army, I mean 50 vehicles per couple of weeks, there could be even some of the protests in Ukraine. Yeah, Ukraine also had severe losses in the summer counteroffensive of 2023. However, still those losses happened for some period of time, not 50 vehicles per single day. Yeah, per single day Ukraine lost, I think, maximum 8 of the vehicles. Those images were shared with Leopard 2 tanks, Bradley vehicles stopped at a single place. But 50 vehicles in this specific spot without territorial gains, absolutely crazy, because back then Ukraine at least gained some of the land. Here Russians, nothing happened because of those attacks. Just Ukraine wasted some of the FPV drones on them. That's it. It looks like Russians are using the strategy to deplete Ukrainian munition and weapons with their own bodies of their soldiers and those vehicles. Wow, look at the munition Russians are using. This is the AK-105, not 47, not 74. This is the new Kalashnikov with lots of the tuning, silencer, scope, wow. And just recall 2022, then there was the mobilization and the Russian army announced, and the Russian soldiers received those kind of the Kalashnikovs. So current picture is pretty much different. Russia invests lots and lots of the funds into its military production, development. As we call it, a Chmobik army back in 2022, it doesn't exist any longer. Russian army gained military experience, they increased the military production, and still it's very hard, tough enemy, and it's better not to underestimate it. Yeah, sometimes it could be some of the cringe in the Russian army because they take all of the men from entire Russia, drug addict, alcoholics, and we have those funny videos with them sometimes, but there are two Russian armies. This volunteer conscription army and also Russian professional army. And they're equipped with those kind of the tools. It's no joke, absolutely. Oh, probably Russians hit Ukrainian Patriot system. I'm not sure, but it looks like it, judging on the evidence they presented. So there's the control center and also radar of Patriot plus support car. They were spotted in Pavlograd, Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. As you see, there were some of the efforts done to build protection for the system. And okay, this is the launcher they show. Could it be a real launcher? Well, we'll see if they hit it, if it explodes like firework. Really hard to tell. Usually there are lots of the traces, however it still could be a Patriot. I do not exclude this probability. One more Iskander strike, and something was burning there, so yeah. There could be some of the fuel, but honestly doesn't look like a decoy. Too much smoke coming from the place. Well, we'll see. The official Ukrainian reports say nothing about this case, but I have to tell it on my channel because I monitor also Russian channels and they share those kind of the videos, and suspiciously it looks like definitely a Patriot system, which is placed, I would say, far away from the front lines. Pavlograd is located over here on the way to Dnipro city. It's pretty much far away from the front lines. It's roughly 70 kilometers, the closest point here. Well, Russians may use their Iskanders for the very far range. 550 kilometers, that's the announced limit for that kind of weapon, but it's announced one. Potentially it might fly further, I'm sure about it. Russia just put 550 on the paper to fit the limits of the treaty with the United States for those ballistic missiles. The problem is that Russian surveillance drones continue to fly and they spot locations of Ukrainian, even Patriot systems, sometimes engineering equipment. Because Russia is now so active in Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, Ukraine start to build new defense lines, but Russia hit that one too. For example, this trench is being digged down by Ukrainian engineering equipment in Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, or in Zaporizhia, it's hard to say really. And you might see Russian Lancet drone is coming to hit it, and there was the strike. Unfortunately, the vehicle was destroyed. The other tools also were hit by Russian Lancets. Some truck was hit too by Lancet also. You see that Ukraine places the Dragon T, so all of those engineering constructions, they are being built kind of late, and Russia is already very close and capable to use even their Lancets. Unfortunately, Ukraine doesn't have the massive production of Lancet-like drones. So yeah, we have some of the tools, but they're not that developed as, for example, Lancet. But Ukraine produces long-range drones to hit Russian infrastructure. And by the way, about the strikes on the Russian infrastructure, this is the Russian oil port in Feodosia, Crimea, occupied territory of Ukraine. Nevertheless, the port belongs now to Russia because they took it from Ukraine. So Ukraine hit it 2 of the times to disturb the Russian logistics, and as you might see, just 5 tanks survived it. The rest is just complete scrap, so this facility is unfunctional because with just those tanks and lack of the rest infrastructure, you cannot operate it. or Russians cannot operate it, it's better to say. Ukraine now tries to protect its sensitive infrastructure, creating those kind of the bunkers and some of the meshes on the top. Well, this protection might save against the Shahed drone strike, but it is useless against cruise missile or ballistic missile. Those are very, very powerful.
Millions of people across the country marching as we speak against the policies of President Trump. This is Boston. Look at that. We'll continue to follow these.
Yeah, there are multiple of the protests today elsewhere in the United States of America. I wonder if it is from this occasion or it was filmed previously and published just right now. I just found this video on Twitter and sharing it to you, showing that people are absolutely not okay with the Donald Trump's policy, including foreign policy relative to Ukraine. Yeah. People are not just for Ukraine out there, but it all combines together, and mostly people are just sick and tired in the United States of this incompetent administration. So fellow Americans, thank you so much for supporting your, first of all, democracy, because it influences entire world. My friends, next video gonna be uploaded as soon as possible. As soon as we have some of the information coming, news, I immediately will film it for you. And thank you so much for making my content, my job possible. Because of your support on Patreon, which is in the video description below. You may find the link for my Patreon page, or your support on membership of YouTube channel. Thank you, thank you, thank you, my friends. And now I wish you all a peaceful sky wherever you are, and have a great time.